Get back.
Hi gamers, and welcome to another updated video on the important aspect of software. And yet again another patch has been released. As you may remember from my original review of DmC Definitive Edition on both Xbox One and PS4, this version sported a full 16 times anisotropic filtering on the Xbox One, or at least it looked 16 times. You can't really tell beyond 8 because you have to really analyse the texture level from where you're sitting, but it's around 8 or 16. There's not a huge difference between the two. I wouldn't worry too much about it. That said, the Xbox One certainly had it in full form and the PS4 version did not have it at all. Now this technique is designed to allow the map levels of the textures to be reused and cached and basically resampled based on the angle of the camera and where it is within the frustum. Now the process behind this is that the actual layer is cached, and contrary to popular belief, it does affect bandwidth. Even though it is a cached process, you have to cache more of the textures across each level. Now the effect can be applied, and usually is, at a per texture setting. But for games like Far Cry 4, where you're using virtual texturing, this is where you see it load in the nearer you get to the scene. If it staggers or the delay is too bad, you end up with a blurred version of the texture and then you see it clear. This is the caching and then the reloading and sampling of that. The virtual texturing process used in Far Cry 4 is actually very clever, and it allows them to have such a large scope of landscape and decals, and something that will be used quite extensively throughout this generation. Even though we've got all this RAM to play with now, you still run out of it very, very quickly. And with textures, the higher quality they get, the more bandwidth you're going to use. So don't expect anisotropic filtering to be a standard in this generation the higher quality textures go. It is still going to be a compromise. Even if you're running a top-end PC game, you're going to see an impact if you run anisotropic filtering times 16 on high levels of games. This will not change. Now, the difference between consoles and PC is the fact they have a shared bandwidth. Now, it isn't a CPU-heavy function. It is purely a GPU and bandwidth stated function. There is some level of CPU overhead, but then again, pretty much everything in an engine has some kind of CPU overhead. Even everything that's drawn on screen is originated from a CPU core. Now these are things that will change, and this is something that I will touch in another video. I don't want to get too heavy with stuff. I'm trying to keep things simple now. But the simple fact is that anisotropic filtering for a game like DmC Definitive Edition was never and should never have been missing in this case. The Xbox One and the PS4 are more than capable of running that kind of level of filtering for anything that's been relaunched this generation, and that includes things like Dying Light. Now there is going to be certain games though, there's going to be exceptions to that, and there's certain techniques that don't work as well if you're using additional texture functions within that. But the case here is DmC Definitive Edition, and just like my Dying Light process, it has now been reinstated on the PS4. You can see clearly from the original release here the muddy flat texture of the ground, and now the new clear crisp textures just like you get on Xbox One are now in place. This applies across the entire game. If you look at the comparison between the left and the right here on the same level, you can clearly see the difference just in the distance of how flat and squashed it looks. Now on its own, it's not something that's going to ruin your eyeballs and be blown out of proportion like it does get many times in many areas. But it is a texture filter that should be in place for a game like this. Now, the Unreal 3 engine has always been crappy with its texture filtering anyway. The level of quality and textures have never been the highest. They've always been quite muddy and blurry. Very similar to what you see in the Gears of War games on the Xbox 360. Although Gears of War 3 is an exception, which will be a video I'll touch on at another time. Now here in DmC Definitive Edition, it's completely missing on the PS4, but has now been reinstated. So that's a really good addition, and just like the Xbox One received the God rays and the dynamic light sources, the point lights, from burning buildings and burning people in Far Cry 4, this is what happens when time is of the essence, and it's always the problem, the biggest problem, when you're developing software. That said though, this certainly seems to fall into the category of a mistake. Like I said in my head-to-head video, it was down to the API conversions of DX11 over to the PS4, and we've seen this a few times now, to be the fact that it's just people don't understand the functionality, whether it's more complicated, it's slightly more troublesome, or whatever it might be, it just missed the process and has been left off, and the default is being left on, which is trilinear or whatever else they have in the engine at this point. So this seems like a simple oversight, lack of knowledge, and simple finger trouble. It does happen in software development far more often than you'll ever imagine. But it's now been fixed. But does it come at the cost of performance? Well, as you can see, my new frame rate analysis, which includes the mean average as it's running throughout the frame, building dynamically, you can see that both versions run identically with the same amount of dropped frames every now and then, meaning this anisotropic filtering, just as I surmised when I originally did my video, has absolutely no bearing on hardware, and it has zero hit on the performance as expected. In fact, as I stated before, the only real issues with the PS4 version of dropping frame rates pretty much sums up the problems of the Unreal 3 engine, which is streaming. Every time a scene needs to load or you fly through a level, just like this corridor level, you get dips of 2-3 frames, and this is the biggest problem with the engine. This game is not hardware restricted both on the CPU or the GPU level. It's most likely just a code-based issue from the Unreal 3 engine. There has not been a stupid amount of work gone into this transfer, outside of Ninja Theory's very well put together updates to the game based on feedback and its huge dossier of changes that are implemented in the gameplay, the turbo mode and everything else. If you are interested in learning more about this game, then everything still stands to my original release. Please check out my review and my detailed head-to-head of both versions here. But as you can see from the frame rate analysis running on screen, there is no performance hit whatsoever on both versions. There is no difference between AF on and AF off, other than what you would get within the standard fault tolerance and variance in separate runs. And from this, both versions average out at 59 FPS across long runs, including heavy boss battles here, which are far more stressful. In fact, the only real issue with the engine, like I say, is I/O access on PS4 and Xbox One, which is where the drops really seem to occur, other than the occasional tearing moments on the Xbox One. I wouldn't worry about it too much. Anyway, this is a quick video just to update you guys, like I promised on my original review and head-to-head. If it got patched, they didn't even lie on the patch. They did specifically state that it's just anisotropic filtering enabled, so there is no difference here. The Xbox One doesn't need this patch. It hasn't received it. That version is still as crisp and clean as ever. So now you pretty much have parity, with the PS4 being ever so slightly better at performance and more solid than the Xbox One, which the screen tearing is the only issue there, but it's not going to ruin anyone's day. Don't blow it out of proportion like everyone likes to do on these kind of things. It's a very small minor difference. Either version of these is going to suit you well. It is a great game. I'll leave you with a few more minutes of footage of frame rate analysis so you can get an idea of it. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this. If you did, please like and subscribe. I appreciate each and every one of you that does. I have much more coming very soon, including my Mortal Kombat X performance and first contact analysis on both PS4 and Xbox One later today, as I'm working through at the moment, so please bear with me on that. You can see behind you a quick glimpse of that footage as I've been playing through. It's a violent, gory game, so prepare yourselves for some epic action on that video. I'll have my PC version early next week, so please check back for a full detailed analysis across PC, PS4 and Xbox One on Mortal Kombat X. You guys and girls take care, and I'll see you soon on the next one.
You're done.